Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. We are going to talk about cookware hygiene and good sustainable practices here. My name is Annika and I work at Granule Disc in Sweden. I work as a trainer and product specialist. I'm not here alone today. I have two of my colleagues with me. I have first of all Mr. Cho Seng-lim, who's the director of sales and service in Asia. And then we have Leo T, who's our area sales manager, also based in Singapore. So we're doing this in the three of us in collaboration. And as I said, I work at Granule Disc, and Granule Disc is situated in Sweden, a tiny country in the north of Europe, where we still have morning. It's 7:30 here in the morning, whereas you are 7 hours ahead. So you're on your afternoon coffee while I'm taking my good morning coffee. It was an early morning today. I can see that some of you have entered already. I think we are waiting for a few more, but we will start a webinar since we have a couple of participants already. Granule Disc, as I said, is a company based in Sweden, but we're not here today talking about Granule Disc and our products. So the webinar will not be about our concept and our benefits, but we will want to share with you the information and the knowledge we have about the kitchen area. We are specialists in the pot washing area, and we have gathered knowledge and information for the past 30 years, and that is what we are going to share with you today. So the webinar will be our key findings in the pot washing area, which is often a very neglected area of the kitchen. Moving on, just a few things before we start. This webinar will last for about 45 minutes, so you know what you have ahead. If you are in a noisy environment, please put your microphone on mute, because if you don't do that, everybody will hear what's in your environment, like a dog barking or construction work or whatever. If you have trouble with the connection, you can turn your cameras off. I can see that you have already turned your cameras off. If you have any questions, you can use the raise your hand function in the toolbar. If you click that little hand, then a yellow hand will appear on my screen, so I know that somebody wants to say something. We also have a chat room available. My colleagues, Cho Seng and Leo, will monitor that. If you have any questions, feel free to use it. Also, we have in the toolbars the three dots there, because if you are on a laptop now and you think that your screen is a little bit small, the presentation, click on the three dots and go to focus or full screen, then it will appear bigger for you in front of you. Just some tips here. And also I just want to say that for training purpose, we're recording this session today. So agenda, I'm going to walk you through cookware hygiene, and I will learn you the difference between cleaning your washware and sanitize your washware. Then Cho Seng will talk about enjoy savings with the right technology. And Leo is our specialist in chemicals. He wants to share with you his information about how to avoid chemical-related issues and also how to create a good work environment for staff. Then I will make a short summary, and then we can have a little session with questions and answers if you have any. So I think we better start here.
Okay.
So how are your pots and pans being washed? Do you recognize this? The 3-bowl sink. There are many disadvantages by using a 3-bowl sink, and let's watch a clip here where we have a lady washing her, cleaning up her washware. Turn off the sound because it got a terrible sound in it, so I just click the no sound button. So what you can see here in the video is a very hard-working lady. She is using a lot of forces to get that little tiny pot clean. She probably spends 5 to 10 minutes only for that particular pot. And this creates and causes a lot of strain to the people working in the kitchen area. So this is not a very ergonomic way of working. You can also see the amount of water that she is using, the enormous waste of water. And just to be on the safe side, she placed a tiny hose at the end of one of the sink at the right-hand corner. So the water is actually dripping over. So she is wasting a lot of water to get this pot clean. Since the watering is dripping over, we cannot see it, but I can only imagine how the floors look like, probably very wet and slippery. And when you're using that amount of water, it creates a lot of humidity, which is not very good for the working environment either. Okay, we'll turn the video off because I think we got the idea of it. You also need to keep a lot of washware in storage if you're washing your pots and pans like this, because due to the low efficiency, you don't achieve a high turnaround of your washware, which means that you need to keep a lot of washware in storage. And of course, it's a lot of manpower that is needed to wash your pots and pans with the help of a 3-bowl sink. So there are 8 disadvantages that I mentioned here for you. But the most important one, the one that stands out, is the lack of poor hygiene, because this is not food safety. And when we talk about food safety, I want you to understand the difference between cleaning your washware or sanitizing your washware. You might wonder, isn't that the same thing? No, it's not. It's completely different, because if you're cleaning your washware, that is more or less only a process that removes food scraps and grease from the pots, pans, or utensil, or whatever washware it is. You're using not a very high temperature. If you're washing with the help of a 3-bowl sink, maybe you have 40, maximum 45 degrees. You can't have more degrees because you would burn your hands. And that low temperature is not enough to eliminate the germs, bacteria, microorganisms. Also, you're using detergent, sink detergent, and that maintains a pH of 6 to 8. And that is not enough to eliminate the bacteria either. So what is it that you have to do? Well, you have to sanitize your washware. And what is that? Well, it's achieved through a very high temperature. You need to have at least 85 degrees or above. And remember, when you're washing your manually, you're using 40 to 45 degrees, and it's a big difference between 45 degrees and 85. So a high temperature is crucial. It's also achieved through chemical sanitization. You need alkaline detergent and chemicals with a pH around 11. And then you have a process that do eliminate the germs, bacteria, or other microorganisms. And that is an absolute necessity for anything that has been or will be in contact with food to avoid cross-contamination. So a huge difference between cleaning your washware or sanitizing your washware. And when we talk about the hygiene challenges in the kitchen, there are many, of course, but the top 3 issues to cause food poisoning, they are 1, temperature, in other words, the lack of a high temperature, personal hygiene of your staff, and contaminated equipment, which means that you have only cleaned your washware, not sanitized them. So you spray over bacteria to freshly produce food. So when you're considering a new technology for your kitchen, bear in mind that these 3 top issues, try to cover these and work with these, then that's a very good start. And pathogenic bacteria, you all know what that is, of course, that can lead to stomachache, food poisoning, or even death in some cases. And when we talk about bacteria, the environment for bacteria, the temperature is a determinant factor for how quickly bacteria multiply. Bacteria really love a warm and moist environment full of food scraps, so the kitchen area is the absolute best place for them to be. They replicate best from 20 degrees up to 45. And remember, if you're manual pot washing, you're using 40 to 45 degrees. So you actually facilitates for the bacteria to replicate if you're using that temperature. They can survive from -2 degrees up to 60, and some spores can even survive in boiling water. At GranuDisc, we conveyed our own survey a few years ago. We wanted to see for how long bacteria could survive in wash water when you're using a 3-bowl sink. And wash water can then be contaminated by bacteria that originate from food scraps. And the wash water temperature in the sink is low, 40 to 45 degrees maximum, which is not enough to eliminate the bacteria. And the sink detergent that you're using maintains 6 to 8 pH. And the study came to the conclusion that bacteria could survive in a sink for more than 6 hours. That means that a contaminated pot could spread over bacteria to freshly produced food, because not all food is heated up to 100 degrees. That is important to remember, that bacteria can survive for that amount of time. Also, when you are about to invest in some kind of technology for your pot washing area, you need to read up on the hygiene guidelines. There are two very, very important ones. The first one is the DIN 10534, it's called. It's a bacteria-specific test. This test is being run by Deutsches Institut für Normen. That will be the German Institute for Standardization. I'm not German speaking, so I don't think you could hear that. Well, this is a German test, and in this test they use metal plates, as in the picture here. And the test bacteria was E. faecium. And the target for the test was to reduce the bacteria to an acceptable level. And the number of remaining bacteria was counted. And to comply with this test, 10 remaining bacteria allocations out of 1 million are allowed according to DIN hygienical guidelines. So this is one of the guidelines that you should have knowledge of. The second one is a bit tougher. That is the NSF, the ANSI 3 it's called. NSF is an American organization. It's regarded as the leading organization in its field. The NSF stands for National Sanitation Foundation. This is an organization that draws up recommendations and limit values to guarantee hygiene in the food industry. And according to the ANSI 3, which is the test for commercial pot washers, there should be a certain heat load transferred from the final rinse water in every cycle in order for the washwares to be considered clean. Well, and how does it work, the test? Well, it's about the pan surface after a complete cycle. To comply with the test, you should reach 3,600 heat unit equivalent, which means that the pan surface after a complete cycle should hold either 72 degrees for 26 seconds or 73 degrees for 17 seconds. These are the two criteria for the ANSI 3 test, and it's a bit tougher. There's not many equipments or manufacturers that actually complies with this test. So you have to select your equipment carefully. Also, when we talk about the success of a wash result, I have to mention for you the Sinner circle. If you don't know about Mr. Sinner, well, I can tell you that he was a German chemist that worked for a detergent company in Germany. He made a study in the late 50s, so this is more than 50 years ago. He wanted to see which principles determines the success of a wash. And there are 4 of them. The 4 factors that needs to interact with each other are time, temperature, chemicals, and mechanical power. So try to find some kind of technology or equipment where these 4 factors interact with each other. If you're washing in a sink, for example, then you're using a lot of time, you're not using the proper temperature, you are wasting chemicals, probably because you're dosing manually, it's not controlled dosing, so probably overdose. Also, you don't add any mechanical power because you are being the mechanical power. So manual pot washing is not very good seen from the eyes of Mr. Herbert Sinner. So try to find something else where you have these 4 factors interacting with each other in a better way. close the chapter of cookware hygiene and cleaning versus sanitation, just want to give you some very general tips. How do you get your washware sanitized, and how do you defeat foodborne infections? Well, just 5 very simple things. Stop manual pot washing because your washware will not get fully sanitized. I hope you understood the difference between cleaning and sanitation. Read up on the hygiene standards, the DIN and the ANSI, when investing in a new washing solution, and make sure they follow them. Try to achieve an operational flow in your kitchen where you keep the incoming dirty washware separate from the clean washware to avoid cross-contamination. A very good tip for you. Also ensure the personal hygiene of your staff. Ensure that your staff has a good personal hygiene and are symptom-free when working. That's more important than ever in those days. Make sure that everyone knows how to wash their hands, for example. And also keep the kitchen area clean. And also inspections should be done regularly. Now I will give over the word to Mr. Cho-Seng Lim, that he will talk about sustainable development goals. Go ahead, Cho-Seng.
Hi, thanks, Annika. Okay, hi everyone. So I'm going to share about a few topics about using technology for a more sustainable kitchen, water and energy savings. But before I get there, I'm just going to share with you about this United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. So this is something that our company is working towards. We're also aiming to get there by 2030. These are 17 goals that are outlined by the United Nations over a study that was done over 193 nations, 8 million people, to see what we can do as a global community to get to a more sustainable future. So for those of us that are in the food service or catering business, I'm just going to highlight nine goals that our business has a strong impact on. So just talking about each of these goals, number 6 and number 7 is about having clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy. So how can we reduce our water consumption and energy consumption? Number 8 is about creating a decent work environment for our employees, our staff, but also not forgetting economic growth, and it also, I've read about this, that it pays to be sustainable as well. There was research that shows that 74% of the millennial generation, which means between the age of 23 to 38, they make their purchase decisions based on selecting brands that are more sustainable. So the people in the millennial generation, they will become the future leaders of their companies, future leaders of our countries, and it makes sense for us to be more sustainable because they make their purchase decisions based on selecting brands that are sustainable. And then moving on to number 11. Number 11 is for those of us in Singapore, how can we be more sustainable within a tiny city like Singapore? But in cities actually do make a big impact into carbon emissions, and that's something that we can all change in our daily operations. Number 12 is responsible consumption. This is really relating for food waste, the amount of food waste that we generate. I'll go deeper into food waste in my next slide. But how can we reduce the amount of food waste that's created in our industry? Number 13 is climate action. The equipment that we use, does it create any greenhouse gases? How can we reduce global warming? Number 14 and 15 is life below water and life on land. It's very much about the plastics that we use. We still consume quite a lot of plastics, in terms of our one-time cutlery, single-use plates. We see on social media a lot of videos of plastics in the sea, an entire island of plastic, and then plastic on land, which is on compost environments that never degrade even after 50 or 100 years. That's a big problem for the earth right now. And then coming to number 17, partnerships for the goal. So these are partnerships that we can explore locally, globally. Who do we partner with? How do we source our our raw materials. We try to source from nearer locations rather than further locations to reduce the carbon footprint. So yeah, so these are the 9 goals that I think where we have a big impact on, and then I'll talk about how it impacts this, and I'll sum up with this also. So the next slide. Um, so adopting new technology. So let's start talking about optimizing food usage with new innovations. I want to share with you some statistics about food waste first. There's more than 1 million tons of food waste thrown away every year, and that's 30% of all the food generated globally. So the big question is, why do we throw away so much food every year, and how can we reduce this amount of food waste? So where does this over 1 million tons of food waste come from? So this is 3 different pies on where food waste is generated. The biggest pie is in food production, so where it's in farming, harvesting, transportation. So that's 450 tons of food wasted there. And then the next one is where we are in the commercial sector. So we are in the second pie. We're actually wasting 380 tons of food every year. How can we reduce this? And then the third pie is, of course, what we can do at home. The things that we can change at home to reduce this food waste also. So going deeper into what's in this almost 400 tons of food waste that we're wasting in our businesses, where does this 400,000 tons go? And it's broken down into three pies as well. The biggest in the food preparation, so where we are doing food prep, and food prep where we are vegetable scraps, meat scraps, bones, all this have second uses. Sometimes food is undercooked, sometimes food is overcooked. All this contributes to this 45% food waste. So how can we reuse this? How can we look into reusing food scraps? Vegetables that don't look so good, bones could be repurposed for good stocks as well. Then the next pie is the customer. From the customer side, 34% of food waste comes from there, and this is something to look into. Perhaps our food portions are too big. Perhaps we are serving too much for the whoever's in the restaurant or in the event. So how do we monitor this, and how can we reduce food wastage on the customer side as well? And then the last part is spoilage. 21% of food waste in commercial sector goes to spoilage, and I feel this is terrible waste here, because spoilage is really simply coming down to us forgetting that we have that thing stored in the back of our kitchen, and there has to be a better way to avoid this situation. And so one way that I've actually seen is this. So what you see here is quite simply a waste bin with on top of a weighing scale, and a digital display on the back of the waste bin, and there's also a Wi-Fi router there, you see. So as the staff in the kitchen, while they are preparing food, they waste, they bin the food. They just need to input on the digital display. Like if I'm throwing in 8 kilos of beef bones, then I just input there. As I'm throwing away, then you just touch the screen and you put in. And then as from the customer side, as the waiters are bringing the food back, maybe they throw away a plate of French fries or a tray of shrimp. Then you just input as you're throwing away. So what this does is that it generates a weekly or monthly report, up to you, how you can make smarter purchasing. Because you don't, if you realize that you are throwing away a lot of certain type of foods, or let's say a tray of shrimp. The customer, over a month, you realize that you're throwing away 15 kilos of shrimp. So that's something to consider. Perhaps you don't have to have that big tray or portion of shrimp. And seafood, of course, that will be quite a big impact to your bottom line, savings to your food also. And then so this way it helps you to generate reports and monitor what is being used. When you have new foods coming in, they also put in through which goes in stock. You have your first in, first out. The system actually reminds you what is actually nearing expiry. So this reduces your spoilage as well. So not a complicated system, but I think it's a really quite a good way to help you manage food waste. And then next is invest in connected water monitoring technology. So always go for equipment that monitors the water consumption. This is always good to help you because when you can monitor and measure, that's when you can actually reduce. So go for technology that has systems that monitor water, monitor electricity, and also something more interesting is that there are cloud connected leak detection systems now. So let's say you've shut down your kitchen for the day or for the weekend, and then there are systems that would be able to alert you on your mobile phone that you have a leak in your kitchen, and then you can actually activate your employee to go and solve the problem. Because if you find out on Monday that you actually had a leak, then you'll be surprised that that turns out to be quite a lot of water wastage. I'll share in my next slide also how a small leak can generate so much water wastage, and you can even have systems slightly more advanced that they have a pneumatic system that would be able to shut off the water valve if a leak is detected also. So the cloud technology has the infrastructure for cloud technology has advanced quite a lot in the last 10 years, and it's also relatively inexpensive to implement such technology anymore these days. So it's something to consider. The last point is invest in chemical saving technology. So whether you're using a sink or whether you're using a machine, in a machine you can use chemical sensor probes that help your machine decide how much chemical is needed in your dishwasher or your pot washer, and this always ensure that you're using the optimal amount of chemical, because the the wastage is when your system is pouring by time, let's say time based. Too much chemical might be going in the system, then you're wasting a lot of chemicals. Or the other scenario is too little chemical is going in, and then you have sanitization issues, food hygiene issues. And even in a sink, you can there's this quite simple mixers that can help you mix the dilution of water and chemicals to ensure that you're not wasting too much chemical. And when staff is washing manually, where they pour detergents by themselves, and that's when there's always a high wastage in chemical. Then moving on to water. How can I save water? So I've 4 points here that I want to talk about, but half of the world's population is going to be living in water stress environments in 2 years, and those of us in Asia, right, it's even a higher percentage. So there's really a lot that we need to do to reduce water consumption. But let me start with the one at the top. So, like I said, always choose equipment that measure and monitor your water consumption. These systems can generate reports. You can download how much water is being used, and then you can make changes to your processes. And then on moving to the right side, don't leave the taps running. So this was the interesting statistic I wanted to share. So a leaky faucet dripping at a rate of 1 drip per second can waste more than 11,000 liters of water per year. So it's crazy how fast water is wasted. And this is 1 drip per second. Can you imagine if you're having a leak going, the faucet has broken, it's going at 15 liters per minute. It's not just the water bill that goes up, but it's the amount of water waste that it's very sad to see. So how can we avoid these situations? And then moving on to update your equipment and processes. So, I mean, when in time when you have equipment that's really old, always consider upgrading, because new equipment always runs more efficiently. It's about water savings, but it's also electricity saving, and processes also. So if you're doing manual washing, for a lot of us in catering, we are washing a lot of rice every day. I think all of us are going through tons and tons of rice. Just by adopting a rice washing machine, right? There are really good rice washing machines from Japan, which can help you save up to 75% of water in the rice washing process. So that's something that's relatively inexpensive, but big savings to your operations. Even for us at Granovis, we challenge a lot of customers that are washing a lot of their utensils in sinks, and washing in sinks, it's a very inefficient way, and then we ask them to go for automated technology that can help you save water. where some customers where they have vegetable washing. They have now automated vegetable washer. Those are also very efficient. But one way to save on top of that is to actually use the vegetable, because water that you use for vegetable washing is still relatively clean. It should be used, it should be recycled to some kind of gardening, and so always look into that kind of process changes as well. And then the last point on the left is educate and engage your staff. And you're probably wondering why there's a burger and a coffee cup here, but it's just some statistic that I learned that I'd like to share. To create a burger requires 2,500 liters of water. So that was a statistic that I found very interesting. That something that we eat sometimes quite often requires so much water to produce. It's about farming the cattle, creating the feed for the cattle. Also then the rest of it, the bread, the vegetables, the cheese. All to make that single burger requires so much water. So we probably have to look into the type of food that we serve our customers also. Maybe we should reduce meats, because we know meat actually has a very big carbon footprint. If we need to serve meat, perhaps we could reduce the amount of processed meats. Processed meats requires more water to produce as well. And then moving to the cup of coffee, a small cup of coffee that we have every day requires 125 liters of water to produce. So can you imagine, it's for a small cup of coffee, it requires 500 times the amount of water just to farm the beans, and then the whole process of making the cup as well. So probably think about reducing your cup of coffee a day, and then you'd be surprised how much water we can save also. And then moving to 4 ways to save energy. So saving energy, let's start with the first one. Smart lighting. Smart lighting, it's really about having sensors in your kitchen. If you have 4 different sections of your kitchen, you typically have 1 or 2 switches that lights up the whole kitchen. So instead of having that, have sensors that actually detect whether there's motion in each of your 4 kitchens, and if 3 kitchens are not being used, then the light should automatically go off and save you some electricity there. And then for smart ventilation as well, smart ventilation and power systems, there are a lot of our exhaust systems are really just one button. One button turns on the exhaust system for the whole kitchen. What I've seen in some kitchens is that they actually have, let's say, 4 cooking sections, 4 cooking stations. There are sensors that actually can detect if a certain section is only being used. The fan for exhaust for 3 other sections should automatically go off, and that actually saves a lot in your electricity bill, which a lot of customers forget. Ventilation systems consume a high amount of electricity. And then moving to the second point is proactive maintenance system. So this is about having maintenance systems that help you schedule when it's time for each of your equipment. It's for servicing. You could have even smart systems that actually can communicate directly with your service provider, so they automatically schedule a maintenance with your service provider. And preventive maintenance is we always emphasize it. It's very important, because all of us have to avoid downtime, and people forget that downtime actually costs a lot more than just a simple maintenance. And there's a fact that a warning that my friend shared with me that I'd like to share with you as well. You see, if you don't schedule time for maintenance, your equipment will schedule it for you. This is so funny but so true. So always remember to schedule maintenance. If you can't remember when to do it, then put in a system that automatically reminds you when it's time for servicing, to avoid those situations of downtime. Then the third point is check your door seals. This is it's a so inexpensive thing, but it impacts a lot of cost in terms of energy. So if you're talking about refrigeration, when you have a broken rubber seal in your refrigerator, a lot of the compressor works a lot harder to keep the food cold, and sometimes you actually end up replacing the compressor much sooner, just because of a broken door seal. Even in your combi oven, combi ovens with broken door seals, your combi oven works a lot harder in terms of keeping the heat up, or keeping the steam saturated. So always do regular checks and replace your door seals when it's time. Then the last advice is remember to switch off everything. It's a simple advice, but I think all of us are guilty of doing it, and we all should be more conscious of the appliances used in our kitchens. And then my last slide is about what can you save. So at Granulis, we are challenging our customers to not use manual washing anymore. So manual washing, whether you're doing it in a sink or a dishwasher, we're challenging you to change to automated technology where you can save water, you can save energy, you can save time, and you can save chemicals. So after this presentation, all of you will get a link to this presentation where you can actually use this calculator that we created. You actually can move the slider around. Let's say so this slider actually represents how many meals you can use per day, how many meals you produce per day. Let's say you produce 2,500 meals per day. With Granulis, you would be able to save 81% of your water, 62% energy savings, and 72% chemical savings. When it comes to on the monetary side, we actually have an estimate here based on the Singapore operation cost as well. If you're using sinks and you've changed to a Granulis, you would save 2,000 Singapore dollars a month, and it works out to be 24,000 a year. Return on investment is slightly over a year. So this is something that you can play around with when you get a link to our presentation. And to sum up my part is that I just want to talk about the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals again. These are the 9 goals that I talked about. What can we do to reduce our usage of resources, and how can we help to get to these 17 goals by 2030? And in fact, the Singapore government has also stated that it's as a nation, we're also aiming towards these 17 goals also. So if you have some time, do go read up about this as well. Okay, so thank you. I'll hand over to my colleague Leo now to continue his part.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Choseng, for handing it back to me. Now I'll continue to talk about the chemical safety in workplace. So every time when we listen about chemical safety in workplace, we will think about very serious conditions like people wearing in white HAMA suits, or very serious chemical spills on the freeway. But in a kitchen environment, it's sometimes less visual, but it's equally serious. So one of the most easiest and most being ignored chemical hazards that happen in a kitchen setting is that there's no proper labeling of chemicals for the chemical containers. As you can see in the pictures, most of the containers do not have any labels to indicate what type of chemical they are, or what if it is a chemical or a food reagent, or just some food that's able to be consumed. So in order to prevent any ingestion, indirectly injection, or mixing of chemicals with food, it's always very important to label it correctly. As shown in this picture, you can see the sanitizers are clearly being well labeled as chlorine sanitizers, and then they have been put on a rack labeled sanitizers too. So it's not just about labeling the bottles or the containers. It's very important to label the rack or any storage space that needed to be labeled. So it's very safe to prevent any cross-contamination with the food materials and kitchen settings. And then you can prevent any further workplace safety injuries from happening. So this is a very common but very small chemical hazard that happens. And then next up, we're going to talk about a safety data sheet. So what is a safety data sheet? It's basically a summary of documents that provide information about the hazard of a document and advise about the safety precautions. As you can see in the picture here, it's normally made of several papers that writes all the content of the chemicals, what is the safety precautions that can be done if there's ingestion or direct contact with the chemicals. So if you're not familiar with SDS, maybe you are familiar with MSDS. They are essentially the same thing, but it has been updated as SDS only through the recent updates from GSS, which is a global harmony system in the international standards. So you can spot all these hazard signals inside an SDS tool. And if you have time, please go to your kitchen area or your production area and try to spot for a SDS folder, such as shown in the picture. And this is normally provided by a chemical supplier. Then it contains all the needed SDS for all the chemicals that is being used in a kitchen setting. So it's very important to locate and know that you have this SDS data, because not just the authorities, the government authorities will ask for it or request for the SDS of the chemical that's been using. It's very important when you have some chemical related accidents that happens, that you have to, when you have to consult medical advisors or visit the hospital, you will have to take these SDS files to the hospital and give it to the doctor, so that the doctor will know what prescription, what medicine they have to give you in order to save your life or treat you to stabilize the condition. So it's not about you, it's about everyone nearby you. When incidents, chemical incidents happen, everyone has to know where this SDS is and then locate the whereabout it. So one of the good small homework that you guys can do is to try and locate your SDS folders in your operation settings. So next one, we're going to talk about the hands and how to protect and wash them. It's a basic knowledge to always use a PPE or personal protective equipment when handling chemicals, especially when you're doing the manual labor of washing pots and pans or any other greasy stuff. So what happens is, if you don't use PPE, if you don't use gloves, you will have a prolonged exposure to chemicals that will constantly wash away the natural occurring grease or oil, which is protecting and moisturizing your hand. So most of your staff are here for the long term. They are not here for short term or only a day job. So prolonged exposure might cause hypersensitivity, as shown in the picture currently. So what happens is, if they do not use gloves or PPE when handling chemicals, all those natural occurring oil on the human skin will be washed away, and then it will cause hypersensitivity, and it's very hard to cure, and it will cause some efficiency in working, because they will have to visit the hospital more often, or they simply cannot afford to handle chemicals in the future anymore. So always be aware and then monitor if your staff is using a glove. And then second would be, always use chemical as directed. When there's advice on the manual, do not use the chemical with bare hands. Please comply to the manual and then use the glove. And then the third one would be to wash your hands after work. Not just after work, actually, before work or during work, when you're changing different action that you're doing. Let's say when you're cutting vegetables, after you finish cutting the vegetables, when you're proceeding to cut meat, please wash your hand to prevent any cross-contamination from happens. And then the last one is, as mentioned just now, wear gloves during work. So about hand washing, as you can see in this picture, there's always area that you are frequently missed during hand washing. And then the area that you always wash, because it's a very obvious area to wash. As shown in this picture, the right hand has more area being covered, because this person is a right-handed user. To prevent any area from being missed during hand washing, the easiest method would be to increase your hand washing time by simply to the recommended 20 seconds. So how long is 20 seconds? You can either time it by just having two songs of happy birthday songs, or simply you can just add a time stop or a timer. You can encourage your staff to click on the timer when they start washing their hands. so that they will always be aware how long they have washed their hands, and then slowly move up to improve to wash their hand for more than 20 seconds or 20 seconds. So this is for hand washing. And then next up, we're going to talk about how to store chemicals. This is a very simple yet hazardous topic. You should not keep too much chemical in the workplace. When you over-ordered, you can always consult your chemical provider to maybe refund or take back the orders. It's very advisable not to keep too much chemical in the workplace to prevent unnecessary accidents. And then the second one is chemicals should not be stored under the sunlight. It should always be stored away from the sunlight to prevent any deterioration caused by UV light. It will slowly decay your chemicals and turn it into less diluted, and then slowly turning into water. So you're essentially wasting a chemical if you are putting it under the sunlight. And then the third one is to avoid shock and friction, especially when transporting the chemicals. You should not run to prevent any unnecessary accidents. And then to sum up, one of the most common chemical accidents is the contact of chemicals into your eyes. When this happens, as shown in this picture, you should always run to the nearest eye rinsing station. But if you do not have an eye rinsing station, as shown in the picture, it's advisable to wash your hand under running water. Normally, they would recommend 15 minutes of continuously washing under running water, but the better advice would be to wash until you do not feel any irritation in your eyes. That's when you know all the chemicals has been washed away, and it's safe for you to stop rinsing your eyes. And then another good tips on rinsing your eyes when chemical got into your eyes is to always remember not to cross-contaminate both of your eyes. If you got chemical contact on the left eyes, only wash your left eye. Do not wash both of your eyes to prevent unnecessary 1+1 situation. So the next one we're going to talk about is some tips to keep the worker safe. The first one would to make inventory and document all chemicals. So this essentially means to have SDS, as I've mentioned in a few slides just initially. So you should always conduct risk assessment and then switch to a less hazardous chemical when possible. So always keep your updates with the chemical supplier. Ask them if they have any safer chemicals to be used to prevent any workplace injury. And then the next one would to inform and train the staff about the chemical use. This is through training them from the SDS documents, or just essentially have some more updated board charts like such as shown in this picture. You will have different labeling for different hazards so that you can educate your staff more on chemical hazards. And then the third one would to be making use of the wall manuals and guides for kitchen equipment. Some of the example of the wall guide would be this simple prevent cross-contamination wall guide for the color-coded chopping boards. It's very useful when you have like, a lot of newcomers or new joiners in your kitchen, so that they will know the simple rule of using different color-coded chopping boards for different food material. And then the next one would be to use a protective gear when needed. I will show you a picture of different PPE. This is a full list of PPE. You do not have to be always fully equipped with PPE. However, on certain dangerous actions, it's advisable to have this full PPE, such as head cape, apron, mouth mask, or even goggles. And then most of the always missed one is the non-slip shoes. It's very essential in a very watery and moist kitchen to prevent any slip accidents. And then the next one would to look for innovation that uses fewer chemicals or basically increases your productivity. So always be open to accept some advices from kitchen equipment companies, or maybe some different advisors from different sectors. One of it is to maybe you can consider to automate more things in the kitchen. Then you can prevent a lot of unnecessary human errors or human accidents. And the last one would be all staff should know what to do in case of an accident. Always have a accident plan. As such, I've mentioned using an FDS when there's any chemical injuries or chemical accidents. So moving on to the last slide, it's about safe working environment. So the first one would be about manual handling. In a kitchen setting, manual handling or carrying heavy stuff is unavoidable. And if it's not done safely or ergonomically, it will hurt your staff or yourself in the long run. In the picture shown on the right side, you can see two men holding the heavy pot in a very ergonomic manner. It's very safe on their back because they're only using their calf or their legs to lift up the heavy pots. It's advisable to use such pose to carry heavy objects. However, it's always being ignored or didn't being applied on day-to-day manual handling jobs. So it's quite important to advise your staff to always watch for good ergonomics ways to transport heavy items. And then the next one would be about slips and trips. The kitchen is always very moist, and then there's always numerous risks created by human errors. Some of the simpler methods is simply to avoid any water spillage from happening. This can be achieved by either minimizing more manual washing or just simply replacing the manual washing with a machine that can contain all the water inside the machine. And then the third one would be improper storage. This is not just about improper storage of chemicals, it's also improper storage of your food, and to have a better system in controlling the storage of food too. Some example would be to apply FIFO, first in, first out system in food storage. And then the last one would be about the fire and electrical hazards. Since it's a very high stress environment in the production kitchen, it's always advisable to have a regular checkup on the electrical equipment and then have a very good anti-fire or fire alarm system in the kitchen. So that's all from me of sharing all this safe working environment. So next time I'll hand back to Anika to wrap up this webinar and then to conclude all of things. Thank you.
So hello again. Now I'm back. I can see my screen. I'll turn my cameras on. So I hope you can see me. Well, the summary for today. Thank you very much, Joseng and Mr. Leo, to share all the valuable information that you have. So what are the key findings of today? Well, I walked you through the importance of knowing the difference between cleaning your washware or sanitizing your washware. We also talked about the cookware hygiene and the hygiene challenges in a kitchen. Then Mr. Joseng walked us through the Sustainable Development Goals, how actually 9 out of these 17 goals has a direct impact on the food industry. We also learned about the savings that you can do with the right technology in your kitchen. And then Leo finished off with all his information about chemicals and how to avoid chemical related issues in the kitchen, and also how to create a better working environment for your staff. So thank you very, very much for listening. I hope you found it worthwhile and interesting. As I said in the introduction, we are specialists in the pot washing area. Granule disc has been in the market for more than 30 years. So we know a lot about the pot washing area. But we don't only offer just a pot washer or a utensil washer. We offer a solution that makes a real difference, reducing stresses on valuable resources. So if you were interested in getting help into it, getting that area into a profitable one, with a lot of focus on food safety and sustainable technologies, don't hesitate to contact us. This is our webpage. I hope it appears on your screen now. It's the webpage of Granule Disc. And Mr. Joseng and Mr. Leo are very eager to get in contact with you. Please also be one of our followers on LinkedIn. LinkedIn happens to be a very important channel for us, where we communicate our message and concept. So that was everything for today. Mr. Choseng, do you want to say something to finish off?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for the time, and I hope it was informative, and thank you. Yeah.
That's very good. Do we have any questions in the chat room?
No questions.
I don't
today.
I don't see any
There's a question
either.
about sharing the slides. I think we will
Okay.
just send an email.
Yeah. After the presentation, well, after 30 minutes now, within 30 minutes, I will get back to my office where I'm situated normally, and I will send you a link to the presentation, so you will have it, and so you can watch it again if you want to. That was everything for today then. I don't have anything else to say if there aren't any questions. So goodbye from the three of us, and stay safe and healthy, okay? Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.